Greetings and welcome to the latest episode of the Vern and Richard Show. In this episode, we are talking about an old friend of ours on the show, automation in testing. That is a perspective and a training, a suite of training materials and methodologies and perspectives that Rich created with his buddy Mark Winteringham. And Rich wants to revisit that because he has a talk coming up, a keynote coming up at Test Automation Days in a couple of weeks. And he's trying to refine in classic Richard style. He's got 1,000,001 ideas bouncing around his brain. He's like, I need to kind of distill these into something. So that's what we talk about. So we go through the existing principles and pillars of automation in testing. And we go through them one by one, and we kind of think about how applicable are these things and relevant in this age of AI. So I enjoyed this discussion. I got a lot out of it as usual. I hope you will all get a lot out of it. So yeah, let us know if you've listened to the episode, if you think we've missed anything, or there's some interesting observations you want to make. Let us know. Anything you want to add, Rich?
Nah, enjoying the conversation. If you've got your different opinions, chuck them in the chat. Let's start a debate. Happy listening.
Enjoy.
Dun, dun, dun. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vernon Richard Show.
Yay!
Hello.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
First obvious thing, I am not at home. I am in the office in one of these little weird booths. So I've brought a microphone just in case there's any noise. So yeah, if there's any audio issues, sorry. Schedules mean we're finding different times to record.
Rich is on tour. By the way, it's Ramadan for me as well. So we're actually recording earlier than usual, which, as it turns out, works out nicely for me because it means I can now do the recording and then go cook, because it's my day to cook on Wednesdays, and the family are going to be impatient for dinner today.
Side note, but curious question. Like, you cook before you can eat, right? So it's all prepped, ready.
So if we weren't having this call, I would definitely be cooking now.
But you can't be tasting though, right? You can't be.
No.
Oh,
no.
How'd you cook without tasting?
If you're cooking an old favorite, then you can kind of wing it,
right?
Or you can, if it's something fast and easy, then you can wait until you can taste it. So I'm just doing some pretty, standard like vegan spag bowl. I cooked a tofu stir fry yesterday, and there's still some food left over there.
Okay.
And I also have some what do you call it, plant burgers in the freezer. So like all bases are covered. Everyone can be eating within 20 minutes of Maghrib. That's when we break off fast. So yeah, I'm covered. Nice. All angles are covered.
Well, on the topic of eating, just in case if anyone notices Richard being weird, I now have these Invisalign things. So I'm trying to straighten my teeth. So if you notice me like just doing this, it's because I've only had them for 2 weeks and I still they feel weird and like plastic teeth. But I have to wear them for 14 months now. So yeah.
Wow.
So by the end of it, though, I should have beautiful smile teeth.
I have an even more winning smile than you've already got, my man.
But today's topic is going to be automation in testing.
Woo.
And the current 6 principles of automation in testing. So any long-term listeners or followers of me will know that, AIT's been around for a long time, kind of been put on the back burner a little bit. And my thinking around automation is never gone away, but like the namespace kind of halted. But I'm contemplating what to do with it. And the talk, I'm giving a keynote in 2 weeks from when you probably listen to this, at Test Automation Days, and basically revisiting them to see if they're still relevant in today's world of software now, and AI and everything, is very different than it changing all the time. And also, is there any gaps? And looking at the ones we currently have, I know one of them definitely doesn't work and will be getting binned. But I'm curious to chat with Vern and see what he thinks about them and what gaps he thinks is missing in the whole principles. So if you've not read the principles, they're on automationintesting.com. The idea behind AIT, just so what these principles are based on, was that AIT was meant to be a mindset and a namespace that promotes
Mhm.
human centric. And by human centric, we meant automation that works for the humans, right? Not just like it has to be assisting me, not replacing me. Within the context of testing. So this was purely related to testing, software testing. And then we focused on strategy, creation, usage, and education of valuable automation that truly supports testing activities. That was kind of the shortish definition of what AIT was. But in short, it's about really building automation that's valuable, that actually is helping you, is impactful, is unblocking you, is making you go faster. Not a lot of the automation we were hearing about at the time that AIT got created, which was, well, it's to be honest, it's still the same, probably, Vernon, isn't it? Flaky tests, broken
I was
builds,
good.
too
Yeah.
much UI. Like, not a lot has
Hmm.
changed really, apart from now we have AI making terrible UI tests.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
accelerated the crappy automation. And I want to make sure the principles are fit for purpose in that space as well, going
Hmm.
forward.
Hmm. So
So,
where do you want to start? How do you want to approach this? Do you want to look at it from the point of view of the problem that this material was trying to solve, or do you just want to get straight into it, look at the pillars, look at the principles, and try and map
yeah,
that to the world of 2026?
I think go through principles one by one, and at the end of it, let's
Okay.
just ask ourselves what's missing.
All right. Let's do it.
So we'll evaluate them one by one. And what I was thinking, if I read them out to you, you can try and tell me what you think they're related to, because obviously I
Oh
know
my
because I
god.
wrote it.
Okay.
Um, so the first one is supporting testing
Hmm.
over replicating testing.
Oh, oh,
What
I'm
comes
already
to
in love.
mind? What
I'm
comes
already
to
in love.
mind when you think about that?
So, for a long time, people in our corner of the testing internet would be talking about testing as a performance. And so it's not just about, you know, the order of things that you click on a UI, a GUI, let's say. There's a lot of other things that you're doing while you're testing. So you're thinking about risk, you're thinking about data, you're thinking about reporting,
Yeah.
you're thinking the risk explodes out into things like performance. So it's like, well, how can I, recreate a Black Friday when I'm just one tester in a single team in an organization? Oh, maybe I'll have to use a tool to do that. So that's what that means to me. The supporting testing is broader than replicating, because when these tools came out, that it was always positioned as you can um, simulate the behavior of a user. That's what the focus was. It was
Yeah.
like a human will click, tap, swipe here, so we can get our tool to click, tap, or swipe here, and then we will evaluate what happens, and then that's testing, right? And you're like, no, that's not testing. There's more to it than that. So that's what that means to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was aimed at. And I still think it's more relevant, still incredibly relevant now, especially with the pace that some of these tests are being made. So, yeah, the idea was exactly what you said. We were told, or we were promised, as an industry, that you can just take Vernon, take your scripts, automate them all, and
Done.
voila, the
Yeah.
same, match, identical.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly. Yeah.
actually it's not true, right? Because number one, you probably weren't even aware of all the stuff you were doing as you were looking at a web page.
Hmm.
Um, so like that was the first thing that kind of led to this, is that making sure people realize that you're not replicating the human, but you can take little slices of what the human was doing and
Hmm.
turn them into a bunch of tests, but you're not replicating what they were doing. You have to
No.
acknowledge that you've taken a little slice of it. And you, at the same time as taking that slice, you've lost that serendipity that someone like yourself would have had, because, like you said, it's a performance. It's, oh,
Hmm.
that's interesting. And that's interesting because, oh, hang on, didn't Joe tell me about this change? And I'm sure Anna was talking about that. And then, you know what? I'm going to try this. That ain't going to happen when it comes to the automated tests, right?
Mm-mm.
And that's kind of what you said about performance, and it's kind of where checking and testing came out of it as well. It's this idea for me that you can never replicate what I do, but you can do little bits of it that are going to help me not have to run that very simple test, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. 100%.
Excellent. So I think that one stays for me. Like I think it's and I think it
Yeah.
stays, and I think it's very important now at the number one or two angles. I think the speed that we can now create tests is obviously accelerated with agents and coding, to coding assistants, but also the movement of agentic or autonomous testing, as people are calling
Mm.
it. And again, yes, they can probably do more. They're probably observing more than what our tests can do, but they're still only observing what they've been told to look at. So they're still not anywhere near close to what me and you would be like. And I
Mm.
think that's the danger now, that I think, people will think they're getting closer because now they're more powerful and they can think and they can do this stuff. And the answer is they can't. They can just
They're not.
observe a lot more than they could before, and they can
It,
interpret a lot more than they could before.
that
So
that that theme or observation, I suspect, is going to come up more than once, because
yeah,
because it's really easy in 2026 with all of these tools that we have available, thanks to this technology, to start anthropomorphizing what the tool is doing. Like it's still, no matter how badass the output, churning out output,
yeah,
and the way it deems that output to be good or bad is, does it sound human? Not does it sound correct? Not is it thorough? Not like none of that crap. It's just human or not. Like, or not even that. Like, how human is it?
yeah.
So if, because the output is so good now, and I say output very deliberately rather than tests or code, I say it just churns out stuff.
It
There
does.
still needs to be an
Yeah,
element of human saying, is this good enough? Or we're still wrestling with the idea of, is this output any good?
yeah. And I
And
love that
because it's so
because
easy to spit out the output now because of the tools,
yeah,
it's like a tsunami of output now. Like, how do we
and
reason about it now?
that's what I like. It's one of the things that I do love about an LLM, though, is you will always get an answer.
Yeah,
It's
that's
very
true.
rare it will not give you an answer. It will always
Yeah.
attempt to get an answer. That's its
Mm.
only job. It's its only mission, is
Yeah.
to give you
Yeah.
an answer.
That's really
Like,
true.
and
So
I
in other
don't think
words, it
people
will never say,
realize it.
I didn't do anything, Rich, because I didn't know how. That is you will never hear that from the
You
LLM.
might get there again, depending how experienced people are. Like, I've got some well-trained agents, like,
Ah,
helping me code, but
and
because I've written essays upon essays upon essays of scripts and context and knowledge and memory, that you
Mhm.
might get to a point where it says, "I don't think that's a good idea." But in itself,
Mm.
it's still an output. Like, the fact it's telling me it's not a good idea. So you're always going to get an answer, basically.
Yeah,
But
nice,
yeah,
nice.
all right, next one. Quite. I think quite an easy one, and probably would never die. But let's see, testability over automatability.
Oh, what this brings to mind for this one? I'm not sure what automatability. What does that make me think of? So to me, everything seems to be about narrow versus broad. So when I think about testability, that feels broader to me.
Yeah,
It's a broader question of how easy is it to operate, control, and observe the application that you're dealing with. Whereas automation is, how easy is this to automate? So it would be the difference between, something is easy to automate if it has very stable and consistent locators. That would be a very automatable thing. But would it be testable necessarily if it wasn't spitting out anything that we could, you know, logs that we could see in our ob- observability tools and our monitoring tools? Probably not. It probably wouldn't be that testable if we couldn't control the data very easily that we were, for the thing that we were automating. So if we had to generate the data via the GUI so we could then run the tests that are also GUI tests, that would not be very testable. That feels a bit icky and slow and brittle and all the rest of it. So
yeah.
that's how I'm interpreting that.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Very, very similar. I think that there's a lot of these principles. We always found ourselves with two sides, or even more sides to it. But yeah, one side was definitely, we were seeing a lot of people making their apps more automatable, right?
Mm,
Locators, things to do with data, but like
hmm
not thinking broader in the fact that, well, if you're going to fix all this code to make data for the automation, why aren't you giving it to the testers as well to make it easier for
Mm-hmm.
them to automate, or the product owners, or any other role that needs to make data? Why have you
Mm-hmm.
locked this little data generation code and only giving it to the robots, right? Like
Yeah.
give it to everybody, and even more so now with, different protocols that you can stick on the top of this stuff. That was one angle, and it was kind of the, don't just go about making these tweaks just for your automation, right? Think about how you can make it for your automation, but also for the rest of the humans in your team. But the
Mm-hmm.
second one of this, which I think is the more broader one of why it existed, was you could have the shiniest automation in the world, right? Perfectly, like no flakiness, deterministic, runs on your pipeline, everything else. But the rest of your team and company's approaches to testing are so trash that it just gets lost, right? So you're constantly battling requirements. The requirements are changing all the time. You're falling behind with writing new tests because of the project timescales. The staff are changing all the week, every week. You've no idea, like features aren't, stories aren't even complete. So you could
Mm-hmm.
have the best framework and the best approach to automation, but if everything else around it ain't right, you're not going to get the value. So back to what I said about valuable automation, I don't think you can have that without focusing on the wider testability of a context. So that was kind of the angle with this one.
Is it is another way to look at it and frame it is to say that you can make your application automatable, but not necessarily testable.
Yeah,
But if you
yeah,
make it
absolutely. Yeah,
testable, you've probably made it automatable.
yeah. And another angle of this as well was actually just reminding me was kind of the results that come out of your automation,
Mm-hmm.
right? If they're not digestible in a very easy way, that's going to help you answer that testing question of is this good enough, or that quality question. That's
Mm-hmm.
another problem, right? You've made it very easy to automate and there's results, but how
Yeah.
are they fitting into that wider problem space? Which is
Mm-hmm.
another angle that I always said with strategy. I never really liked it. I still don't when people have an automation strategy. Like for me, the automation strategy would be a part of your testing strategy. When they
Absolutely right.
when they live in isolation, they're now competing.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're being initiated, ran by different people, they're now competing. They want their
Mm.
strategy to win. When really
Mm-hmm.
the problem has always been testing, which is, to be honest, why automation in testing became a name. Because the problem has always been testing. It's
Exactly.
not an automation problem. It's always been a testing problem.
It's not. We're not. Automation isn't the goal. Satisfying your customers and your stakeholders is the goal, and
Absolutely.
automation is a means to that end.
Yep.
Um, Within testing, which is also a means to that end. Do you know what I mean? So
Exactly. And when we were
it's
discussing in a few of our QE episodes and QA and testing, in the wider space of also sometimes quality, it's like,
yeah.
yes, we need to test to get the knowledge, but that's also impacting this wider quality viewpoint of is this good enough?
Mm,
Is this
yeah.
product good enough?
Right.
We've got all the testing results, but they're also being digested into that wider quality bubble too. So,
Huh. So it sounds like you're saying this also stays.
well, I think it does stay.
Do you think you're going to tweak it though?
I don't know. I think the tweaking or the explanation is important with this one. I think because again, I still think testability and automatability are misunderstood. Right?
Ah, okay.
Testability is still very much altering the product for a lot of people, whereas in the definition here, it's much broader. It's a much
Okay.
broader look at the whole context you're trying to write automation in. And if
Mm,
you don't address that and make that work, it doesn't matter how good your automation is, it will always lose value
mm,
because the system it's sitting in, the testing system, is not fit for purpose for how good your
mm,
automation could be. And
mm-hmm,
often, if you solve the wider problem, which is why automation, like you just said it yourself, you don't just have automation, right? It's serving a purpose of helping you do your testing. So
mm-hmm,
if you don't solve that bubble first, your automation's going to be not as valuable. And if you do solve it, your automation becomes a lot easier. It becomes really
mm,
obvious of what you need to do. You're not in
mm-hmm.
an uphill fight. So I still think it stays, but I think we just I need to make it very distinct, clear definition of my testability or what I mean by it. All right,
Okay.
this one's going to be good because I think we've had a lot of chats about this next one.
I'm looking at them. If you're watching the video, you can see my facial expression. I'm looking at them, and this one should be the first one. But anyway, continue, Rich.
Oh, they're not in order.
No,
Testing,
I mean,
testing,
in an AI world, this is going to become the first
exactly,
one.
yes. Testing expertise over coding expertise.
it's it's almost like Rich planned this out because it's a beautiful segue from the last point. The point isn't necessarily to become an expert at writing test automation code. The point is to become an expert in testing, and in so doing, you will be able to leverage the tools. I
Yeah,
think lots of us have worked with people who um, were really, you know, handy with Selenium, let's say, but they would need someone to tell them what to test, or they would
yeah,
need someone to hand them a set of existing tests and say, please automate those. But if there was no human around to guide them, or if there was, look at this, if there was no guiding, it's always been there. If there was no human around to guide them, or there was no test artifacts to guide them, and it was this human Selenium expert with an application in front of them, I've worked with people who would be absolutely stuck, like
yeah.
really stuck, to know what to do. This is an easy yes. It's almost like yes. Next principle, please. It's like, do you know what I mean?
So it is, but there's a little nuance for me that I'm unsure. I think it can be incorporated, but I'm wondering if it needs another principle or if it needs the wording.
Yeah,
So
okay.
100% exactly what you just said is why it exists, right? There was lots of people at the time this was written who were incredibly good at automating, right? But they needed to be spoon fed the tests,
Mm,
which for me diminish their value in certain contexts, right? In some contexts where a lot of companies were playing catch up, right? As in, we've got
mm,
thousands of test cases and we want them automating, that person thrives. But
yeah.
as soon as they've caught up and now it's about designing new tests and at the same time using those new tests to evaluate the old tests and delete
Hmm.
tests or move tests to new layers,
That's why I
they
frowned earlier.
started to
Yeah,
fall short.
yeah, yeah.
Um, However, now so that was one angle, and then it was also another angle of going to the code school, right? I don't know if you remember, I did a talk ages ago with the cartoons, and everyone was queuing up to go to code school, because we were all being told we needed to learn to code, right? And
Oh, yeah,
me and
yeah,
you have had
yeah.
lots of
We have.
technical versus coding conversations, right?
we.
But I think that's now really fascinating to me because of the coding agents we have. So you are technical. You've heard
Hmm.
enough to know what good frameworks and patterns might look like in automation now,
Hmm.
but you weren't ever able you never really implemented them a lot because you didn't know the coding bit. So
Hmm.
you were kind of aware, and if you did sit down and code, but it was becoming a hurdle. Whereas now, test
It's
code
gone.
is not complicated,
It's just gone.
right? If you get a good prompt, you will get a good test code.
Hmm.
If you give it the right, if you know how you want the code to be structured, or not
Hmm.
even that, to be honest with you, if someone built a repo that had the shell of a good playwright, there's loads of them out there, right? But you take a shell of a good playwright framework, job done. Between us all, we could write a paragraph of Markdown that was always there that basically said, "This is how I want you to write all your tests." It will go wrong
Hmm.
on occasion, but now knowledge of those frameworks and patterns and good tests and types of tests is arguably more important than it was always. I think it always has been more important than the code, but it was worthless without knowing how to do the code bit, maybe, or unless you had developers
It
helping you.
was. Right. So that's what I was going to
Worthless is
say.
a bit harsh, like, but less
Yeah. I don't
valuable.
think worthless is the right word. It's
Yeah,
more that you couldn't leverage it yourself.
yeah,
So you would have to go and find a buddy to say, "Hey, I need this tool. Can you build it for me?" And that's obviously what I did because Richard
yeah,
is correct. Um, I would see lots of opportunities for, oh, if I had this tool, I could do this. So I know because I've got enough expertise in testing, I can conceive of the test,
yeah,
but doing it without a particular tool is not feasible or advisable.
yeah,
And I'm immediately thinking of people like my very good buddy James Thomas. Like I can imagine he's just like an absolute flipping kid in a candy shop with these tools, because he's really good at spotting the opportunity to leverage technology to do something, do stuff for you. But he has a particular aptitude with coding. He's a very self-deprecating guy, so he always tells me to chill out when I'm bigging him up. But he can code tools, and the kind of tools I'm thinking about are just small tools that I'm not trying to put them in production. I'm not even necessarily saying that people outside of my team should use them. I'm just saying me and my immediate delivery team, in our very specific context, here's a tool. Let's build it.
Yeah.
As Rich said, you needed some coding skills to do that. But now that's just the barrier to entry for that now is low. Now it's about, can you see the opportunity for something that doesn't exist that would help you, not building it just for the sake of building it, but something that I can't do X. If I was able to do blah and point this thing over there, then I'd be able to have what I needed.
Well, I think we might come to that one in the next one, but like
Mm.
there's one more angle on this one is I feel like there might be an opportunity for a new principle around automation framework knowledge and good automated test design over the code itself now. So
Okay.
the knowledge of how, again, it's back to I always have this. I need to find out who wrote it. It's the whole coding versus programming. Programming was the theory of it, the modeling in
thinking.
your head, the thinking of how beautiful this code should be and was structured, and then the coding was bashing the keys. I feel like there's a principle in that space now, like around. I think yes, you would always have a good test, right? Which we've covered that, but then you would have a good design for that test, right? Because the human test can't just become the same test because you might not be able to observe what the human was observing. The assertions might not exist. So it's that design bit now. Think about how you could now write that in a spec style and give that now to a coding agent and have the code come out. It's that difference, I think, now. Whereas before, I would do that initial first step, and then I would also have the skills to write the code, and I would know they match. Whereas now, it's the design of the tests, but also being good enough to know the code's not trash, but you don't need to know how to
That's
write it all.
I
That's a
was
subtle
so
difference.
that's what I was going to add, that part, because I think when you start to expand on these things, I think that's a point that will be worth covering, because these tools seem to be improving all the time. I think we're still in a space where having some, I think to me what this feels like is, from the perspective of being a toolsmith in particular. I know we're going to
Yeah.
follow. I know the next one's coming, but yeah, the coding, there was a very high dependency on that. I think now it's less, but it's still valuable, because if it gives you some spaghetti code that runs, but it's spaghetti code, that might be an issue. And if you
Yeah.
can't recognize that, and if some other team gets hold of the thing and they're like, oh, this is trash, you're
Exactly
like,
that.
well, it's only meant for me, and I didn't supposed to productionize it, blah blah. So yeah, I think that is an interesting little caveaty nuance point to explore.
But there's another one on the back of that, which is there's so much to unravel when I think about them. But there is the
Rich is not leaving the office for a few hours.
there's
We're going to be for it.
did I lose it? No, I don't think I lost it. It's the evaluating of code, right? Again, if you know how to code and code well, you can do that. But also, the evaluating of code is almost identical to a testing problem. Is this code any good? And now that you've got LLMs, if you know how to design tests, you can create basically a bunch of questions. Why is the code written this way? Why is it written that way? Why is it done this? What's this? What's that? Blah, blah, blah. You can almost have an exploratory testing session with the LLM to find out about this code. Yes, it's going to take you a bit longer than it would take me, but you can now do that. Whereas before, if you couldn't code, you couldn't do it. And we always used to speak about the difference between reading and writing code.
Yes.
Reading code and now having an agent or an LLM help you learn about it and challenge it and question it. And you could ask it, would you write it differently? And it might say, I would use agent pattern instead of page object modeling. Oh, what the hell is that? Google. Blah, blah, blah. Google's not helping me. Oh, James, come over here a minute, James. What's the difference between these two? All right, it makes perfect sense. Go
Mhm.
away, LLM. You're wrong. I like the pattern we currently have. Oh, I'm sorry, Vernon. You are correct. But you couldn't do that before. You would only have the screen in front of you and the code, and basically referencing Stack Overflow or your own knowledge. So again, I think there's something I need to get clear in these principles that I don't think that approach is bad. Well, do I think you'd be a better engineer if you could code from the off and know that from the off? And yes, you're going to be quicker. But now you have an option. If you couldn't code before, you now have a lot more options than you ever had. And it's not just blindly generate me some tests and thank you. You can now use your testing skills to evaluate it and learn about it with the support of an agent, which you couldn't have. And that agent, I know there's a lot of conversation going on across our industry, right? Yes, the agents aren't amazing, but are they as good as a brand new junior person who can read code? Yeah. They're not a 15-year automation engineer, right?
Well, at,
But
at,
they can read code.
at the time of recording, we've had, a couple of, you could call them doom mongery articles about the future of AI, about how we're all going to be replaced, etc., etc., etc. And those folks have been pretty unequivocal about the capability of coding assistance, let's say, today. And they would argue they would definitely say it's up to par with a junior developer. And I think some of them are trying to say it's actually getting as good as me. That's what the hell.
And
You know what I mean?
it's only going to get better. I've actually just
Yeah.
shared a link that I posted in the chat before we started recording, which I forgot to say to Vernon. But have
Uh,
you looked at outcome engineering yet, or O16G as
it's
it's been called?
yeah. I've got the link in my
Right.
tabs to
Yeah.
read.
That's
Yeah.
very interesting. I feel like it's a bit too early. Like it almost feels like there's a race at the moment to write the
You've gone too
agentic
soon.
agile principles. You know what I mean? That's how it feels. Like someone's desperately wants to write the AI principles or the agentic principles, but
if if
um,
if you if you follow Simon Wardley, rephrase. If you're not following Simon Wardley, please follow Simon Wardley. He talks about this. We are, I'm paraphrasing. This is not how he would do it. He's far more articulate than I am, I guess. But to me, we're in the Wild West again.
yeah, absolutely.
So all the best practices and the good practices are
Gone.
in flux. They're emerging. We don't know
Yeah,
what they are.
yeah,
That's part of the fun, you know.
yeah.
So
Agreed.
yeah, this thing
Cool.
is a shot in that direction, I guess.
So I think that's the first one where I feel like there's a new one needed, just to be a little more nuanced about
Okay.
the way we can use agents, and the way that you can still get. It used to be about just being able to code, whereas
Mm,
now, and I think that implied the knowledge and the coding bit, right? The
hmm.
test design bit, the coding bit, the good design patterns. I think
Yep.
now we can have one without the other, and I think that needs calling out.
Yep.
Second one, problems, or next one, sorry, problems over tools. Or it used to be problems before tools, but now we go for problems over tools.
Yes, keep. Next question, please. No. So, this is the old adage: if the only tool you've got is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? It's
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
It's basically that. Can we let's first, it's a very uninteresting perspective or question to ask is what tests are we going to automate? Whereas a better question is, but why are we automating this?
yeah,
Why? How does that help us? What's the goal here? So yeah, that's my simple take of that.
yeah, absolutely. So there was again multiple strands to it, but that was the main one. It's if you've got a playwright framework and that's what you view the world of tools and automation as, every problem you have gets shaped to look like a playwright test, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need to be there. We didn't need to be there when I wrote these 8 years ago, and we don't need
No.
to be there now. Now, any problem, we should be looking, and we were discussing offline, right? There's now options in automation outside of testing, right? We talk a lot of the time we're QEs, we're QAs, but now we can be building tools to help with assessing quality or
Mm-hmm.
the wider quality problems. Is
Mm-hmm.
this a good story?
Mm-hmm.
Is this story confusing in any way?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what tell me about this PR? Tell
Mm-hmm.
me why the builds failed, like, and suggest what to do. We
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do that many years ago. Where also now we're still not seeing some of the basics being done, in my opinion. Like when you watch people like trawl through logs, of loads of times, it's like that's a solved problem. Like you can build some grepping tool, some log merging tool, or something like that. Um, and even easier now, you can now just ask those problems to an LLM and get a throwaway tool, a throwaway script in a matter of minutes. So yeah, the main one was initially don't let your tests and your problems be shaped by the tooling you have. But also now more than ever, it's what testing problems are you facing? What's slowing you down? What feels like it takes a long time? And go and find solutions for them that are
Yeah.
now going to speed you up.
Yeah. I would. I don't think there's anything more to add.
No, I think it stays. I think it stays.
Yeah.
Next
Okay.
one, focusing on risk over coverage.
So again, my interpretation here is that we assume that to give a specific example, 100% code coverage doesn't necessarily convey 100% risk coverage. Like, what are the things that are actually important in your given endeavor? Is the place to start, rather than whenever I see the word coverage, it's usually in pursuit of a particular number, and number is kind of arbitrary. Yeah, if you
If you're listening, it's Richard just licking his finger and putting it in the air, like,
yeah,
what number should we
if you
go for?
achieve exactly, if you achieve Rich's arbitrary number of, like, pick a number, Rich.
74.
If you achieve 74% coverage, are you comfortable to ship in every situation? Is that good or is that bad?
Yeah.
Would 73 be terrible, and would be 75 absolutely amazing? So
And we've got that on
the
a project
coverage in
I'm
and
on
of
now.
itself is not helpful.
Yeah, we've got one now that I'm in. It's something like they want it to be 95% or something. But I also
Hmm.
saw an interesting article now, again, back, not to go too much back into AI, but having such standards in place now might be deemed better than it was for a human because the human had more judgment and more contextual awareness than the AI. So there's
Huh.
like some people now are making an argument that actually 100% coverage is almost a safety net, a valid safety net for some
I
agents. I'm
see. I
not sure
see.
I
Yeah,
agree,
yeah,
but
yeah. I get it.
it's interesting to hear. Yeah, again, so thinking back to the time, it was written because a lot of people were just taking the stance of one test case, one automated test, and that's you covered. Like you've got everything. And then there was also the conversation of, well, it's so easy to write end-to-end tests.
Let's just
If I write one test at the top, it covers
let's churn them
everything.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it covers everything below it, right? I get all the things in one big go. But then obviously now we've had the flakiness problem, the test take too long, blah blah blah, right? So yeah, the angle here is anyone's seen my visual task analysis talk. It's what is the risk? Why are you writing this test? And if you can't answer it, don't write it. Because therefore,
Uh-huh.
back to my definition, it's not valuable. If it isn't mitigating something and providing value to you as a team, why does it exist? And
Uh-huh.
does it exist because someone's told you to get 100%? Or does it exist because this test has always existed and no one's questioned it before? So
Yeah.
therefore, we have to automate it.
Yeah.
So, risk is almost like the forgotten word of testing, like it feels sometimes.
It
But
really is. It
what is the
really, really
risk?
is.
And that the focusing on that, answer that question first. But then also, we're chatting before we started recording. Where in the system is that risk?
I was going to bring that up. You read my mind.
So, what layer of the system, and do you
Hmm.
even know your system? Do you know what
Well,
layers exist?
well, indeed.
So, and if you don't know that, then it's even harder. And we were also chatting about things, around systems that now have AI in them. So
Hmm.
again, what is the risk around that? Could it spit out something that makes, I talk about AI bit now being probabilistic, right? So it'd be like, but
Hmm.
well, I've changed my language just a little bit. I used to say it's non-deterministic, but actually it's not. It's more probabilistic.
Great shout.
So,
Yeah, indeed.
but then what could that do down the line for the deterministic part of the software? So if that's spitting out a true, and further down the code you go, if true, case
Well,
closed,
yeah.
and actually, nah, that's not right, right? Like what over else, like what could have gone wrong there? So
Uh-huh.
now I feel like we need to be really thinking a lot more about risk and focusing on that over this arbitrary made up coverage, right? And I'm not saying coverage is bad, because I know there'll be people out there, oh, it depends on coverage of what, right? If you're going down a risk modeling approach and that you cover all that model, that's that's not bad, but that's still risk over coverage in my eyes, right? The idea here with coverage was just blindly chasing
It's
in,
yeah.
vanity
y-
metrics.
That's
So
that's how I that's how I thought about it as well. Risk is about intentionally going after a particular kind of coverage. So when I see this principle from AIT, it's what it's saying to me is, okay, most teams who have this, you know, this coverage mania, if you like, focus, they've definitely had the conversation, but they had it once and they had it a long time
yes,
ago and they didn't revisit
yes,
it and go,
absolutely,
is this still a
yeah,
thing? Like, is this still good enough? Should we increase it, lower it? Like, what does it look like? And it's that's the issue. And if you turn it into an iteration where you keep questioning, is this coverage metric any good? Now you're just being intentional, and it's a little bit more risk based
yes,
because the bottleneck was never the code. It was never the execution of the tests. The execution of the tests. So we've made all of that even cheaper. We've removed a lot of the friction.
yeah,
So that is we should be focusing on stuff that is actually going to make us more intentional about what we're doing.
yep, absolutely. All right, last one. And sorry, I agree that one stays. I see no issue with that. I think it's more probably, again, it's still not being practiced enough. So I think it has to be repeated and repeated. And for that,
Mm.
I still think a lot of teams' issues or that they're not achieving that valuable automation because they're not focusing on risk. Maybe it's not
Hmm.
about coverage, but the fact this principle exists would make people go, "Why are all our tests end to end? Why are they so big?" And
Exactly.
that's still a
Yeah.
problem. And I
Yeah.
think again, the coverage would have stemmed from, like you said, there would have been a test case at some point that was written as a user and they automated it as a user. Because one of the other
Hmm.
things that comes up when I talk about risk is I often talk about the actor, or which part of
Mm.
the system are you trying to mimic?
Hmm.
And it also stems a conversation around protocols. Because if you're trying to mimic an API, you have to talk HTTP, which to almost find you the tool that you need. If you're trying to
Yeah.
mimic
Yeah.
PRC, you need to do that, right? If you're trying to mimic,
Mm.
Python, you need to be in Python, right? So,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely stays. Right, the next one. I'm just going to
Bloody
say, I'm
hell.
not going to give my opinion. I'm just going to say it, and
Go
we'll
on.
we'll discuss it.
Hmm.
Observability
Hmm.
over understanding.
Ooh, this to me means um, it's the difference between it's kind of Kineviny, right? So it's the difference between do I do all of the reading up front, and so everything is predetermined, or when I need to find something out or a question pops to mind, can I just go and find out what the answer is? So it's a little bit about the testability thing that we were talking about before.
Yeah,
Whereas this is do I already understand the behavior that I'm seeing? Do I already understand the behavior that I expect to see? Or can I figure that out in a just in time kind of styly? So
yeah.
how does that sound? What's your explanation?
Yeah, not far off. Like, so, yeah, I think we had similar thoughts, and then I think the like 6 months after publishing these, observability became a thing, right? So when we wrote this, it wasn't based on observability, the movement that we have now. It wasn't about
Ah,
tracing and logging and
okay.
monitoring and being able to trace down in production. It was nothing to do with that. It
Mm.
was actually more of making your results of your automation more observable instead of
Mm.
always fully understanding what they are or what the system is, right? So,
Hmm.
so it was a lot of time where people were desperately trying to automate everything, right? As in, to do that though, you need to understand your system completely, which is an infinite problem because
Mm.
software is inherently so complex. So it
Okay.
got to the point of where what can we do that gives us enough insights into the system to enable us to research when the time came up instead of spending weeks and months trying to fully learn the system so much
Right.
that you're not moving quick enough.
Right.
So it was kind of that angle we were going down. It's what tools could you build to make it easier to observe your system? So logging, for
Okay.
example,
Right.
was one that came up a lot. And could you build tools around the logging to alert you when things were happening, such as, again, it's very simple monitoring now, but like there's been 500 error 500s today, and being alerted to that instead of testing infinitely to make sure a 500 can never happen. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and
Exactly.
but then the observability movement came out, and obviously monitoring and advanced monitoring came out a lot more. And I think you mentioned Noah Sussman earlier or in the start of this,
Legend.
or I remember
Yeah.
him talking about um, advanced monitoring is indistinguishable from testing
Yes.
because there's
That is a
always tests
Noah-ism,
ongoing all
and
the
I dig it.
time.
Yeah.
And that for me was the same thing. If you have that observability observations going on, you can use that to help you with the understanding when the time comes, instead of
Hmm.
trying to fully understand everything without really knowing why. So that was kind of what it was aimed at. And the automation side was about building tools to facilitate that and enable that, which has ended up
Right.
being the observability movement in a way. So this is the one that I'm not sure how well it fits anymore. Because it's observability. If you say that word to people, it almost infers or implies the Ollie movement. So, which is wasn't
Yeah,
its
I'm not.
intention.
I see what you mean there. I'm not sure either now. And maybe my answer was influenced by that observability
Yeah.
movement because I've been, shout out Abby Bangs, I've been harassing the shit out of her about this for years, literal years. Um, so yeah, maybe my answer. But I think what it feels like to me is it will be in the automation in testing ethos, post AI update, whether it will be an explicit principle or just kind of, you know, threaded throughout in some way. I'll be interested to see how that shakes out.
I think it.
Um,
I think it depends. Again, I feel like observability obviously has a wider usage than just testing, right? It's obviously used in SRE space. It's used in DevOps mindsets. So
mm,
I think there's an element there of it's still a tool, right? And for me, that means it belongs in automation and testing. So I
mm,
think it's probably more of a principle to nudge you into the direction of, does your team have observability tooling in place? Do you have good
mhm,
monitoring, logging, things that are going to help you when it comes to debugging a problem,
mhm,
instead of trying to be all powering, all knowledgeable from the offset, right? Which we just don't have the times for anymore. So I think
mhm.
it stays, but I just don't think it's as strongly tied to automation as it should be for an automation and testing principle. I think it's broader. It's almost falls into the quality space a little bit for me.
I think it's more quality than testing, maybe. Yeah, yeah. This one feels like it needs some
Yeah.
refinement more so than the others.
So that's the end of the list. So what challenges do you see that people are having with automation that's kind of not covered by some of these
Blimey.
principles? Which is a bit of
Um,
a broad question, but
I think these are pretty good buckets, pretty good principles. I think in this AI enabled world. I mean, we talked about this before we went live, but I think it comes down to how effectively or how sophisticated is your use of the tools.
mm,
How deliberate are you? Um, which I think that falls into testing expertise, problems, supporting testing. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. Yeah, I don't think I can't right now think of anything to add to the principles, but maybe, when I'm in
I've
the
got,
shower,
uh,
I'll think of something.
yeah, there's a few. So I mentioned like I said them to you differently. Like they're not worded in the definition as being the pillars, but like mentioned,
Mm.
there's 4 pillars of AIT. There's
Oh yeah,
strategy.
yeah,
A
yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
this
yeah.
covers strategy. We had creation, and I think there is something in creation that I want to explore. In that historically, there's been a lot of perfectionism in automation frameworks
Mm.
over the value. And I always
Uh-huh.
think back to people saying, "Well, I need 3 weeks. I need 3 months to build a framework."
Okay.
And it's like, well, you don't. You need to automate the first test,
Yep.
and then the second test, and then the third test, and then the fourth test, and at the same time maintaining some standards. So I think there's this concept still of, there's a lot more focus on the framework than the value that comes out of it. So there's something around that I want to explore. That ultimately this is about these tests are about providing value to testing, which in turn provides value to the business.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, you want a nice shiny framework, but sometimes you can't, and sometimes you've got to overlook that and accept that at the fact that you're providing value quickly.
It's that it's
Um,
that it's that principle of providing value quickly. You used the right word before about perfectionism. That is the correct word. It's that principle of progress over perfection. What's the smallest thing we can do to make this situation better? So we could pick a single specific thing to check. We can just set that up to run in a particular frequency or on a particular trigger or whatever. And now life is a tiny bit better than it was before, hopefully. And then maybe by the time we get to the 10th edition, a new need has sprung up that is a little bit perfection-y. It's like, oh, okay, now we need to kind of abstract this out into something else. And that gives you a little bit more momentum rather than trying to build the perfect framework with everything considered, all singing, all dancing. I mean, one of the things we talked about before is is was it automation inequality?
yeah, so yeah,
Right?
I left that in the notes, yeah, to try and come back to it at the end. But yeah, that's an
Okay.
option
I mean,
now.
maybe no, we don't have to talk about it. We can loop back to it. But when I look at the pillars as you've called them,
Yeah.
they seem like they go into a more of a quality direction than a straight up.
Well, I
I'm
think that's because they're
interacting
framed.
with the product right now.
I think it's because they're framed more around how to do high quality automation, right? So if you're doing high quality
Mm.
automation, you're almost in
It
turn,
sits within
yeah,
the
like
strategy,
if
let's
you're
say.
doing automation really well and your quality is high, you're almost without doubt going to help the quality of the testing,
Mm.
which is going to help the quality of everything else.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think there's definitely something around creation that I'm going to explore. Well, I already have explored it. I'm just not giving everything away. But yeah, there's around the creation of the test. There's definitely something missing here. I think it comes a little bit underneath the risk over coverage, and I think it comes
Mm.
underneath problems before tools. But I'm
Hmm.
wondering if there needs to be a bit more specific to kind of have a wider impact on the industry. The next one is around usage. So the one that I want to think about around usage
Mm.
is I still feel that there's a lot of blind trust put on the result of automation,
Do you
which,
think?
yeah, I think needs a principle in there around. I've called it the illusion of green in the past. And I still think there's a lot of, I don't think enough people know what all their tests are doing enough to blindly trust it, which I think is what's happening. I think the fact it goes green and they think they just did a good job at the time when they wrote that test probably isn't true. I think your application's shifted, the knowledge has shifted, the tools have shifted. A lot of tests might be not testing anything you thought they were at all. And if you're not regularly reviewing it, your blindly trust of green is a danger. Um,
The other thing that I'm working on with my team is the assumption. the other thing is the assumption that everything is free.
Yeah.
And so everything being green is not necessarily a good thing because everything comes with a cost. So if you're not going back and reviewing the usage, the risk is that everything starts to bloat and gets, you know, expensive in terms of
Yeah.
time, money, and energy. So it's uh it's an interesting point. I mean, I know I I like listening to you rant about this actually because I find it amusing and also learn a lot when you get annoyed. And I know one of the things that annoys you is people not deleting tests,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that kind of feels like this might be a thread in the conversation about usage.
It might be, but I also feel that comes back to like risk over coverage a little bit, as in,
Oh,
again,
okay.
keeping a test for a
Yeah,
vanity
yeah, yeah,
reason
yeah,
or whatever
yeah,
isn't often that case. But yeah, there's definitely something in there. And then the
yeah.
last angle is the education piece. And to be honest, even at the time of writing this, the talk's in like a couple of weeks, I've still not nailed it as much as I want. And it's it's the same old problem that we've had in testing. People don't understand what testing is. We
Mm.
suck at explaining what testing is. And we have the same problem with automation.
Mm.
And I think that is a very early thing to address in a company
Mm.
to help people with their automation adoption and usage. And I think that's missing in these principles. I don't think any of these principles focus on education of the teammates, the business, the stakeholders, to make them not have ridiculous expectations of what you're doing, um, to them, which almost then constrain all the other principles. So there's something in there that I want to make sure we definitely look at. Um,
That is out of all of the um pillars, I think this is the one that triggered the our pre-conversation about, are we talking about testing or are we talking about quality?
yeah,
Wasn't it?
yeah, absolutely. But that's a good segue into the final bit, which is quality, like looking at how long we've been recording for. And it's kind of like maybe I
Ah,
think we leave this for like an open episode on the next one, but
yep.
revisiting these principles and the talk is framed around testing. And I think I want to make sure people are going to understand that in the talk because we've only ever really been able to automate things specific to testing.
Mm,
We've not been able to automate some of the things we can now, which
mm,
is
mm.
a lot more broader in the testing space. So I think these principles are very much focused at testing, but I think right now there's an automation in quality opportunity,
Oh my
which
god.
I'm not seeing enough. I'm seeing a lot of people using agents and using ChatGPT, but I think it's time to maybe um, like align or have a strategy or a framework around what the options are now. Because we've
That's
think about test automation,
yeah.
UI, API, contract, unit, service, the test pyramid, whatever. Right?
Hmm.
Where's the quality? I hope no one makes an automation in quality pyramid. Please don't. But like, where are the options and who's educating people on? I think you told a story offline around checking tickets stories. Is this a good
Yeah,
story? Does it
yeah,
make sense?
yeah. One of my
Um,
teammates has built a little agent in Jira to review the air quotes quality of the tickets.
exactly. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to come out of that. So I'm going to address that at the end of the talk because I think it's if you've been if and we said this as well, if you've followed AIT principles for automation and testing or for testing, taking that to the quality space is a lot easier because they're the same. It's just a wider view of now that the way testing fits in quality. And also ties back to the conversations, the previous episodes we have around what is
Yeah,
QE, what is QA, what is testing.
exactly.
And for me, the use of automation now is making it quite distinct to me around what is a quality task or
Mm,
a piece of work versus what was a testing piece of work.
hmm.
Because of the interpretation, right? With testing, it was very much not always, but it was often right or wrong, good and Whereas in the quality space, it was a bit more: is this good enough? Is this
It's
acceptable? And we couldn't measure that before because it was right or wrong. All our assertions were pass or fail. Now we're
I
moving into
definitely
AI and evals and things like that. It's different.
I definitely want to come back to this because there's a bunch of things that I've been reading from legends like Angie Jones. Um, I'm trying to get up to speed with testing these kind of AI enabled. I keep using that phrase. I don't know if it's the right phrase. AI enabled applications, and it just feels like everything that we have been arguing for the whole time that Rich and I have known each other and been in the industry and longer is now becoming like super duper mandatory. Like
Yeah,
super mandatory. Like if you think you can survive without pipelines, with the volume of code that is being output by everybody now, I wish you well in your endeavors. If you think that testing from the perspective of this passed and this failed is going to help you in this world, I wish you well in your endeavors. Like everything's going to have to be a little
yeah,
bit more exploratory and qualitative and context dependent and risk based. All of these things are going to come to the fore, but I reckon we can get into all of that good stuff in
absolutely,
the next one.
absolutely. And just the one that triggers me at the moment is the context word, because the way it went from prompt engineering to context engineering, and the ones
Is
that are
wasn't
getting
that interesting, eh?
the ones that are getting the most value are the ones where they're good at understanding the context, and the best
Mm-hmm.
testers I know in the industry are the ones that tailor their approach to the context.
This
And
is
if you've been doing that and you know how to explain that, you're almost
listen,
ahead of the game now when it comes to using these agents.
listen, mate.
And there's a lot to unravel in that for another episode for sure. But yeah,
I'm gonna
all right.
zip it because I'm gonna get hype and we'll be here for 2 hours.
So that's a wrap. So yeah, and that talk's
Hopefully that
being
helped
done
you
at
out,
Test
Rich.
Automation Days. I'm hopefully going to do it somewhere else. I've got a few. I'm very lucky this year. I've got 4 keynotes, and I'm currently trying to work out whether I do the same talk and improve it, and kind of use this. If you ever watched the redefining test automation talk that I did at Selenium Conf,
Not watched it
um,
yet.
I almost feel like that this talk is kind of the next of that, like just cementing it. So I feel like I might want to do it a few times, but also I'm not the kind of person that does the same talk twice. But
You sound like bloody Alan Page.
yeah,
He
I
just
need to think about that.
he cannot, like, he has an allergic reaction to it.
Yeah, we'll see, we'll see. But yeah, hopefully I might be doing it at another event. But if not, we'll get some other content out there soon. So yeah, thank you all for listening.
Hmm.
And it's
Oh, quickly, I'm going to be in a lead dev panel
mm,
um a week today. Hopefully, this will be out before then. It's on the 25th of Feb, and I need to quickly scramble to remember what it's about. It's about the how to measure the business impact of AI. So there are some stellar people on the panel. Join,
including
like,
Vern.
sign up. It's free. See, rich has to be rich. So join us for that.
No, I meant you were one of the stellar ones, like the stellar list
Nice.
included. Then I was
Oh,
being
oh,
nice.
I do apologize. Yeah, so do that. But yeah, and that's it. I'll stop talking.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.